And with that, I'll go ahead and get us started. So this is the first 2022 ProLink webinar. We are starting a series of these, which I'll get into in a minute. And the topic of today's webinar is updated COVID guidance. Today, we're going to have this is the agenda for the day, starting with about just 5 minutes of general information. Most people who are joining today know ProLink pretty well, so we'll spend 5 minutes there, then go into our business presentation, actually covering that IRS guidance with our speakers, and then we will finish with a software demo for the last 25 minutes. Today's speaker, so I'm the EVP for ProLink Solutions, Bree Kruder, and I am joined by Josh Brown, who's the Director of Strategic Initiatives for E&A team. And then finally, we have Kelly Insignias with ProLink, who is our Senior Product Manager for HFA. All right, quickly headed into our general information. So before we get started, just kind of introducing what this series is meant to accomplish. I'm really excited about it. It's a great way to kick off. I guess we're technically in February. We almost got it going in January, but kicking off 2022, offering a series of webinars with the objective of sharing industry trends and hot topics and presenting them alongside technology. You know, I'm sure everybody on this call, you all consider technology a huge of huge importance to your organizations, and we do obviously as well. So I think it's an opportunity for us to share and discuss how technology can help serve and support these the industry evolution that we're all experiencing in affordable housing. For presenters on this webinar series throughout the year, you're going to see a business presenter and a technical presenter on every one of these events. Our schedule is generally going to be the first Wednesday of each month, February through October. In November, we host our ProLink Tech Live event. So that's more of a conference setting in November. So you'll be invited to that. And then we're going to take December off because everybody needs December off. This is totally geared towards supporting housing agencies nationally. So majority of at least today's audience is actually users of ProLinkHFA, but it is open to all agencies across the nation. We hope that over time, this audience continues to grow and add to the number of different experiences people are having with the topics that we're in discussion over. And then as far as topics goes, we will generally be able to announce the next month's topic at the end of the session prior. So right now we're going to be covering our IRS Notice 2022-5, covering the updates on COVID guidance. And then in March, we are already gearing up to share workflow management for housing agencies. So that is going to be our March topic. And then this slide, talking about ProLink Solutions, as I mentioned before, most of the audience today, you know us, you've met with us, you're clients of ours, you're users of ProLinkHFA, and we appreciate all of this. And you've seen our slide, you know who we are, you've seen this information about us before. I will say, just kind of, again, kicking off 2022, we have some big goals at ProLink to help support our clients and our employees and run with operational excellence this year. We're really focused on really improving our customer satisfaction is a huge area of emphasis for us, has been for years, certainly is going into 2022 as well. And then employee satisfaction is a huge area for us as well. We all are seeing the competitive nature of just workforce this year. So it's the same in software as it is, I think, in other industries as well. So we are really focused on those two areas to support our operational excellence as a software vendor in the affordable housing industry. And I'm hoping, and I look forward to these webinars serving as part of that for us. Just so you know who your neighbors are, here's a quick slide with the different logos and clients that we support across our different products, and we appreciate you. Thank you for continuing to be our partners. And please reach out to each other and know who's in the room with you as we continue to have these webinar series. Okay, and with that, I'm going to hand it off to Josh and Kelly to start our business presentation. I think Josh is going to take over our screen share to start that.
All right, thank you, Bree. I should be sharing my screen now. So hello, everybody. It is a pleasure to be with you today. And for today's presentation, what we're going to focus on is something that I think everybody here should probably be familiar with already. Just a recent guidance that IRS put out, Notice 2022-5, related to the extension of certain exemptions for the tax credit program and some new exemptions that are available. We are going to highlight just a few of those out of that guidance and just kind of talk through what that guidance says and what the options are for agencies in utilizing those. And then Kelly is going to show you ways to use ProLinkHFA to keep track of that. So we're going to try to focus on understanding why it's important to maintain accurate documentation. There's going to be certain decisions that you're going to be making on either a state-by-state basis or a project-by-project basis. And it's important to keep a good record of those decisions that you've made and the basis on which you made them. And then using the tools that you have at your disposal effectively to keep track of those is really important and is one of the things we're going to be talking about today. So jumping right into it, the first one that we selected to talk about is the placed in service deadline. So for properties that had an original placed in service deadline in the year 2020, that new deadline is now December 31st of this year, 2022. And then it gets into a couple if-thens. So if a property had an original placed in service deadline that was the close of last year, 2021, but it also had the original deadline for the 10% test to be done before April 1st, 2020, then that new placed in service deadline is also the end of this year, December 31st, 2022. But then we have a couple scenarios too that extend that placed in service deadline to the end of 2023. So if applicable, if a property had an original placed in service deadline, that is the close of calendar year 21 last year, and it had the original deadline to get the 10% test done after April 1st, 2020, and on or before the end of 2020, December 31st, then that new placed in service deadline is now the end of next year, December 31st, 2023. And then finally, if that original placed in service deadline is the close of this year, 2022, which means that the 10% test deadline was sometime in 2021, then that new placed in service deadline is December 31st, 2023. So you can start to see how these different scenarios can play a part in different properties having different extensions applied to them based on certain criteria, and why it's important to make sure that you're tracking these decisions effectively. The next one we're going to talk about is the correction period, the reasonable period for restoration in the event of a casualty loss. So it's important to note that this guidance applies to casualty loss events that were not pre-COVID pandemic major disaster events, and or if they were covered by Section 8.02 of Revenue Procedure 2014-49, which you all remember talked about federal disasters, federally declared disasters, and how to handle those back then. Now, if these events that occurred had original restoration deadlines that occurred on or after April 1st, 2020, then the new deadline for that restoration period can be extended by 18 months. But in no way can it exceed the end of this year, December 31st, 2022. Now, it's important to note, I think most people here are agencies, allocation agencies, that while this exemption is permitted, it's not mandated. So agencies have the discretion over whether they wish to permit that extension, a shorter extension, or no extension at all, based on the reality on the ground in your location. Another area is the compliance monitoring aspect, and specifically the review of tenant files. So we know that under prior guidance, agencies haven't been required to review tenant files for that time period between April 1st, 2020 and December 31st of 2021. Now, some have continued to review files when possible and devised ways that they could still do that. But regardless, as of January 1st of this year, 2022, agencies have to resume the review of tenant files. A couple of changes for that, one of which is the reasonable notice period. So we all know the reasonable notice period standard to be 15 days. However, between April 1st, 2020 and the end of this year, they're allowing that reasonable notice period to be 30 days instead of 15. But at the end of this year, effective January 1st of 2023, we have to revert back to use the 15-day notice. Another compliance monitoring aspect is the physical inspections. So physical inspections, that exemption has been extended and they're not required for that period beginning back in April 1st, 2020, and now through the end of June 30th, 2022. Now they give a lot of discretion here to states due to the varying severity in different areas across the country. Agencies are permitted some flexibility. You can extend this waiver beyond June 30th, 2022 after you consult with public health experts and make a determination about your locality and whether or not an extension is warranted. So you can apply that extension to the state level, across the board, specific locations within the state, or on a case-by-case specific project basis. Regardless of whether you intend to recommence the inspections in July or extend that, no extension can extend past December 31st of this year, 2022. And then finally, again, the reasonable notice applies to this as well through the end of this year. The reasonable notice for physical inspections is also permitted to be 30 days. Now, the last one we're going to talk about is the correction period. So if there was a correction period for findings related to an inspection or file review that was set by the agency, if it ended on or after April 1st, 2020, but before the end of last year, 2021, then that correction period is extended by a year from that original date. Regardless, though, the extension cannot extend beyond the end of this year, December 31st, 2022. So if the original correction period ends during this year, 2022, at any point during this year, then that period is now extended to the end of the year. So if your correction period ended this month or next month or March, that is now extended through the end of the year to December 31st. But again, this is another area where agencies have the discretion. They're not required to grant that extension. They have the discretion whether to provide that extension, a shorter extension, or no extension at all. So that was just a brief highlight of some of the guidance. So the question on our minds is, how do I keep all this straight? There's a lot of variables that were included in those discussions and things that are going to need to be taken into consideration by each agency to do what fits you in your portfolio. So we've highlighted the fact that you have this flexibility on if and how you choose to apply these available exemptions. And as you make these decisions on that case-by-case basis, or whether you choose to apply it regionally or statewide, accurately tracking those decisions and maintaining the supporting documentation to back up how you made those decisions is extremely important. So with the rest of this time here today in our webinar, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, who's going to take the remainder of this time and walk you through ways that you can use ProLinkHFA's product to document the decisions that you've made related to this guidance. So when you look back on this time in the future, and you need to support the decisions either to the IRS or to internal stakeholders or other folks that you need to, or even yourself, just reminding yourself what you did and the decisions that you made, you'll have that information at your fingertips. So with that, I will turn it over to Kelly and let her show us how to use ProLinkHFA to track this stuff.
Thank you, Josh. Hi, everybody. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Again, thanks everybody for joining us today. I am going to be working primarily live in the system. Josh, confirm for me that you can see my screen okay? I'm showing you ProLinkHFA.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, thank you. We'll be working primarily today right here within ProLinkHFA. This is my production demonstration system. So what that means is everything that I'll be showing you is available in production right now. So, you know, if you're already a customer with ProLink and you're live in production, you can follow along with me if you want to and see the screens in your environments. But point being, you can, you know, put some of these suggestions, some of these recommendations right into action as soon as is feasible for your organization and your team. So you can see I'm starting out today on what we call a portfolio property or a property. And I want to kind of start out with an overall concept and an overall recommendation for your properties in your LIHTC portfolio as it relates specifically to this notice 2022-5. So you can see that I have navigated to my comments hub for my portfolio property. So I've clicked out on that comments hub in my left navigation menu. And then you can see that, the screen that's displayed is in fact that hub, which for some who aren't quite as familiar, this comments hub is really a running conversation area that you can utilize on your property. You can see in my example property here, it's kind of some information being shared back and forth, between myself and Brian Cohn. You can see kind of, we've made some comments from some different locations or from the property itself. So the recommendation really here is kind of minimally, start at your property level for your LIHTC properties and at least notate, this notice, maybe include the date that it was published, and then possibly, as I've kind of done as an example here, maybe list what the highlights are from this notice, maybe list kind of what the decisions or the procedure process updates that your team has agreed to, list those right there in that comments hub. And then that way, like Josh mentioned, going forward this year, next year, as we're looking back, whether it's us looking back or we're doing any kind of reporting to the IRS or, even out to the owner agents themselves. This gives us kind of that home base, that foundation area where we can record, this is the notice, this is what it told us to do. Maybe these are the decisions that we made. Okay. As I create kind of that comment, if I need to edit that and add more information, kind of as we're getting into the discussions with our team, and we are making updates to potentially some of the procedures, I can update. As you see, I clicked that kind of edit box at the lower right there. I can make updates to, the detail that I'm listing here, and I can save that. But this is, at a minimum, start again at your property level and at least record the basics of this notice and, if you're able, what some of the decisions are procedurally that your agency is going to follow. Okay. Again, that'll help you now going forward, whether you're remembering or trying to report. Okay. So next, I want to take a look at kind of these individual items that Josh mentioned. And so I do want to show a slide for kind of each of these areas because I've got some recommendations listed here. And we will be sharing out the slide deck so that y'all have this. And especially can kind of have these notations of some of these recommendations items that we're suggesting, that you can follow. So we start with file review strategies. I've got a little highlight here of kind of the basic concept, right? It's being able to extend that notice period from 15 to 30 days. So regarding the file review strategy, the recommendations here are to publish updated procedures to your Procorum work centers, okay? Let your owner agents know what's going on, right? Again, that lets them know. It helps remind you how you're proceeding, right, with this program. And then it's also a great, audit and reporting mechanism, right? If IRS comes back to us at some time and says, how did you treat this? You can have those updated procedures in that work center to present and prove that you in fact, followed the notice and let your owner agents know how you were handling this change in your procedures. We want to see you doing those file reviews electronically, and we'll look at that in a little more detail here. We still want to create our file review records, previously while we had a waiver, we wanted to do that. But of course, now that we are required to start up those file reviews again, we want to be creating those records in ProLinkHFA and recording the statuses there. And then finally, we want to use our activity notes on our file review record to record detailed status and outcomes, particularly as it relates to COVID in general, and then, this type of notice that gives us this extension. So let's look at some of these things live in the system. I'll break out of that slide deck there. So first, let's take a look at our Procorum Work Center. So again, I'm in my production Procorum Work Center for, my Garden Court property. And so what I've done here is within my current year folder, and then within my file reviews folder, I'm just wanting to be sure that I am uploading those updated procedures there. Now, this is an example, okay? I'm not dictating that this is the folder structure or the level where your procedures have to be. I'm not dictating that your procedures have to be published in a Word document. Just an example, a suggestion. I want to get kind of your creative ideas flowing and, get your team talking about and thinking about what is this going to look like for you, okay? The other recommendation around updates of these procedures is creating tasks for acknowledgement, first of all, of receipt by your owner agent of those updated file review procedures. And then, of course, having a task that, acknowledges or where that owner agent is telling you that they've completed, in fact, that file review, okay? So recommendation number one there in your file reviews, again, updated procedures documents published to the work centers, and then those tasks to help, certainly acknowledgement of receipt of those updated procedures, okay? So then next, we're recommending, of course, we have been now for a few years, that you're doing these file reviews electronically, okay? And so, just an example here, still within my file reviews folder, just some folder structure, just some suggestion as to how to lead your owner agent into conducting this file review electronically, right? So the idea here is that you create those folders around those areas that you're reviewing, and you're asking that owner agent to upload those files to those various folders for your review, okay? Absolutely feel free to create tasks that guide your owner agent in specifically what documents to upload. Feel free to create tasks for your own team to complete that review. What documents should they be looking for and the like? Obviously also include all of the steps that at a minimum you want that owner agent to be completing in terms of that electronic file review, which files, how many of each type, minimum content, possible examples, if you have a preferred file format for any of those files that you want them to be uploading, all those details should be included in that procedures document, okay? Another quick note, as we kind of think about moving on to ProLinkHFA, consider utilizing your checklist functionality as well, right? to guide your team in completing those file reviews, particularly, in the times that we're in right now, where we're kind of having really annual changes in these procedures. The use of checklists with, those kind of different procedural updates year by year is a really good suggestion. It guides your team in meeting what's required of you by the federal program, but it makes it easy for your team too, right? They can just kind of check right through that list and feel comfortable and not have questions and be trying to remember just from memory, what are the updates? What are the procedural changes this year due to the pandemic? Okay. The next item that we talk about in terms of strategies for our file reviews is, of course, continuing to create these records, right? We have to create the record in the system for tracking purposes, using our status and our overall results. But let's also be using our activity notes, okay? Here we can record any detail about the file review itself. Was it electronic? Did the owner agent refuse to participate electronically? If they did, let's get a statement from them and let's upload it to our files tab. Any of those types of details, specifically related to this file review, or, how the procedures were treated by the owner agents themselves, can all be recorded here in our activity notes. And again, kind of reiterating that concept of this might be an additional step or two that you're performing, but this guidance that we're being given is indicating that we have to do this. We've got to follow what the guidance is instructing, and we need to document it. Because, literally most of you have hundreds of properties that you're tracking. How are you going to remember which property did what, particularly this year, but then going forward into, next year, the year after that, when we might be questioned about how we treated a certain property, what was their response? Let's just record it in the system right here on the record while we're dealing with it. And cover ourselves. And then going forward, we don't have to worry about that again. Okay. So let's take a look now into our inspections strategies. What can we do to be, again, documenting these new procedures and, the changes, the procedural changes that we might be making. Now, of course, kind of same concepts apply that we saw with file reviews with our inspections, right? Publish your updated procedures in your work center, provide tasks for your owner agents that describe what they need to do, particularly in the areas where there may be changes, coming down, through this guidance. One of the things that I really want to highlight for us is, because that guidance gives us the option to, potentially waive inspections again, if it's an area where it's just not safe yet. Consider for those types of areas or other areas, consider the idea of performing electronic inspections to the best of your ability and the ability of the owner agent. You can see I have an example here within my same Garden Court Work Center. I've come into my inspections folder. You can see I've got my procedures published here. And then I've got an inspection template published here. And we looked at this together a couple of years ago, but it's been a couple of years. But if you're kind of leaning toward or thinking about this idea of an electronic inspection, Again, there's a template that you can provide to that owner agent and ask them to complete for your inspection. You can have a folder, as you see here, that can be for pictures and videos. Ask that owner agent as part of that template to be doing, small short videos, of, a selected handful of units if possible, or like we see here, pictures, common areas, staircases, and the like. This idea of the electronic, could be, a higher use, again, in those areas where you might typically be waiving, right? Because it's not quite safe yet, but, consider this concept of electronic. Certainly does not replace visiting that property in person. Probably nothing ever will, but at least get some information on the books that, you did, follow through and do, at least some level of light inspection for that particular property, even despite the fact that they were allowed a waiver, because of safety issues. This is still a possibility. Okay. Now, obviously, because of the waiver that this guidance gives, we can't force people to do this. But let's ask them to do this. Let's ask them to participate, and, we'll do what we can, okay, with the response that we receive. So next up, regarding inspections, and this guidance, the possibility of the waiver, and also, extension, right, of that notice period from 15 to 30. Let's use our user-defined fields, our custom fields, to help us track some of the details around what might be going on, what might be transpiring, per inspection, per property, right? Because we, again, depending on the area, depending on the scenario, we might be having different procedures. We might be getting different responses. So I've done an example here in the user-defined fields, or the custom fields for my inspections. I've created an indicator of, were the procedures followed? I created a comments field. I created a waiver extension date. These are just some examples of some of the fields that you might track around the inspection as it relates to COVID in general, and, particularly to this notice. And so remember that as we create these user-defined fields, of course, we can see them here on the screen. We're looking at that together. Remember, though, too, that those fields, as you create them, they're automatically available to you in a data view for current or later reporting, okay? And then finally, one of the items that I want to note, both for our inspections and for our file reviews, we do have this functionality on the main tab of each record. That's our next, in this case, next inspection year for the file review. It's the next file review year. I would recommend, especially, in our inspections, the system is going to, record from this year plus 3 years, right? That's kind of the standard next time that you would be going out to do an inspection. I recommend, even if you're doing an electronic inspection, and you're getting some information, if you're doing just the electronic, inspection, or you've got a full waiver of an inspection on a property, remember to adjust that next inspection year to next year. Okay. We want to make sure that we're not missing some of these properties, and recall that recording that next year in the system helps you in building out your records for next year, right? We've got that utility that will, the system will read that next year from each current record and generate the appropriate following records for you, okay? And so again, we can do that in both our inspections and our file reviews. In terms of file reviews, of course, we have to, start those back up again this year. Depending on how those go, right? How those file reviews go, because we may have missed a year or so, we might want to just automatically do another file review next year rather than waiting kind of that 3-year period. Okay, so just remember to, utilize that functionality. It'll help you out with a little bit of that tracking of, what you've got to cover next year with all these, waivers and the like going on. Okay. Next, and I think truly final thing for the inspection records, you can update your pick lists or your selection list values for both your status and your overall inspection results for your tax credit inspections. So, for your status, you could include a not completed because of COVID-19, right? This would be a status that you'd use for, this year for the properties that still need a waiver. And then same concept on our results tab with that overall inspections results, include a, not completed COVID-19 type of value there. These selection lists or pick lists, as we call those, are available for you to edit in your environment. So you can add those values and use those, starting today if you need to. And of course, the values that I've selected, those are just guidelines, you don't have to use what I've suggested, but at least let this, spur your conversation and spur your planning in your team of these different tools that you can use across both these types of records, file reviews and inspections. And again, following in that concept of, we need to document this for ourselves, for our owner agents, and for our future selves, and potentially for the IRS, just in case they come along and ask, what did you guys do? And if you're like me, I won't remember what we did property to property because there's just too many of them. And so make it easy for ourselves, right? Document these procedural changes, document what we're doing property by property. Okay. So let's talk now about correction period and the extensions here. So, just like we thought about with file reviews and inspections, updated procedures in our Procorum work centers so that, our owner agents know that this is available to them and how we're treating the extension, what kind of additional documentation do we want, those types of updates in those procedures. The other things that we can do for ourselves within ProLinkHFA, one thing will be to get our correction letter templates updated to notify or detail any extension for correction periods. And you'll see I've navigated here in the system to the compliance review record. And then I've clicked on my files tab, and you can see that I have my table or my grid here that lists my workflow files. So what's going on here, and this is kind of a reminder for some, maybe new for others, via workflow, I can have the system add my correction letter template to my compliance review when the record is created. Okay. And it's just an easy way to have my compliance officers have access to that most recent template letter that we're using for corrections. And so you can see I can open that Word document this is just an example. I don't have a lot of detail here, but, just shows that, that's just a really quick, easy way for my compliance folks to have that latest and greatest letter that they should use for correction notices. And particularly if we have made some updates around, what we're offering for these extensions or how we're talking about the extension to this correction period. Okay. The other item, the other tool that we can use in our compliance reviews is, again, our user-defined fields. Okay. So you can see I clicked on that custom fields tab. I've got a COVID-19 relief for LIHTC. Here, I've got an example of, did they waive an inspection? That information can be here on the compliance review if you need it to. And then, the correction period due date, if we are making extensions to that, what does that look like? And then, the ability to record any details around that. Okay. And so remember, as we create these user-defined fields, they're available to every compliance review on every property that we're evaluating or reviewing. Okay. One other thing that I want to notate, just very quickly, this guidance, this relief that we're talking about, right? This is coming from the IRS. This is specifically regarding our LIHTC program. It could help you all as kind of the frontline people in terms of your tracking and whatnot, to make recommendations inside your organization to offer similar type of relief in your agency specific programs. You may not be the person who makes that final decision, but this is definitely something that you could take back to the folks, who are leading your organization and who would make the decisions about any relief or waivers in your agency specific programs. If they could follow some similar ideas, it's certainly going to make it easier on you all, as again, the folks on the front line, but it's going to make it easier too on your partners, on your owner agents. And so, that's just a suggestion that I kind of wanted to drop in for everybody. Consider, do you give some relief in your agency specific programs? Okay. So we looked at those ideas for those correction periods. Let's turn our focus for just a moment to the placed in service deadline, the extension. Again, publish procedures on Procorum. Publish procedures on Procorum. I can't say that enough. That's really coverage for you, but it also, again, lets your partners know what to do. As well, in our building records, we can utilize the existing projected placed in service date that we have in conjunction with our placed in service date. But we can also, again, we can rely on our user-defined fields. We can create, COVID-related relief fields that let us know pre-COVID projected date, COVID adjusted placed in service, and then adjusted comments. Now, the example that I have here is, I included the text from those 3 options that we have from that guidance of how to proceed with adjusting this date. You could do that. You could include the option, that's applicable for this property. You could also add those options themselves as user-defined fields here with checkboxes and select the one that's appropriate. Again, I'm not dictating how you utilize these items, but I want to suggest to you how you might be able to use these and get those conversations started. And finally, same concept with unit restoration and the deadline adjustments there. That's at our unit level within our property. Again, we can use our user-defined fields and record, restoration deadline, actual adjusted deadlines, as well as any comments that we need to record around those. Okay. And I think that does it for demonstration today. I know that was a lot. Please reach out with any questions that you have, and I'll turn it over to Bree now.
Thank you so much, Kelly. All right, and just wrapping up, I'm going to reshare my screen. You should be able to see that now. Talking about next webinar. So thank you so much to Josh and Kelly for joining us for this one, and everybody for participating. Our ProLink HFA webinar, the next one will be in March, and it will cover workflow management and housing finance agencies on the 2nd of March at 3 p.m. Eastern. Ryan is in the background here. He is posting the link to go ahead and register for that one so you don't miss it. So please look in the comments for that registration link. We're going to be covering questions like what is workflow management, how to improve your business process through workflow, and how does that work in ProLink HFA. So we hope we see you there. Ryan is going to be acting as our business speaker. And then we have Sarah Supernant, who is our customer success manager, who will be facilitating our technical speaker, and I will be moderating that session. So I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you for participating in our first webinar. Last thing I'll say is we love creative ideas to keep this going. So if you have any, please email me. I would love to hear about your suggestions for future webinars or any other options that we can come up together to share information about our industry collectively. And you can see my contact information on this final thank you slide. So thank you, and we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your week.